Seem to be having space issues on this new laptop, at least from the amendments I had yesterday. I'm not really sure what that's all about. But anyway, um, I'll just see how long this lasts for. I want to talk about the general election and the debates that are scheduled for this general election because there's been a bit of controversy over the fact that the ITV debate is going to be restricted to Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn. Nicola Sturgeon is threatening legal action against ITV. It's comes on top of Joe Swinson threatening legal action against ITV. As far as I know, Nigel Farage hasn't made any sort of proposition like that at the moment, but of course, Farage and Johnson are kind of in some degree of collaboration with Farage getting Brexit Party candidates to step down in certain Tory seats. I think there's going to be a lot of manoeuvring going on in this election, very much along Brexit lines. I want to talk just a bit about this issue around the debates because it is very important. Firstly, for any international viewers, the idea of televised debates is still a relatively new phenomenon in this country. The first time it was done was only in 2010, so we're only familiar with this now for 9 years. In many other Western democracies, the concept has been going on a lot longer. In the United States, of course, since the 1960 Kennedy Nixon debate. In Canada, since at least the 70s, I believe, in the Canadian federal elections. In France, it's been going on for years. I remember seeing the late Jacques Chirac debate with Valéry Giscard d'Estaing. Um, so, I mean, not directly, but from archival footage. So it's a relatively new phenomenon in Britain. I'm not sure what ITV's response to this is. I'm not sure if they're going to cave in or not. Here's my take. The fact of the matter is that, in all likelihood, the next Prime Minister will either be still Boris Johnson or Jeremy Corbyn as the two leaders of the major parties. Jo Swinson has insinuated sexism because, well, she's a woman and it must be the patriarchy keeping her down. I always get put off when women politicians resort to the sexism card because, I mean, Theresa May was a woman and she was the leader of a major party and she was invited to have a debate format that never happened in the 2017 general election. But I think if Joe Swinton want to make an argument, don't bring sexism into it because that's a pretty phony claim. There's no basis for that claim in my opinion in this context. Um, I do think that she makes a valid point about having a Remain voice, in the sense that well, Jeremy Corbyn's very hard to work out whether he's Remain or Leave. Johnson is obviously a very prominent Leaver. So I do think she makes a valid point about having a Remain voice in debates. But there's going to be a number of debates. I think there's going to be at least four different debates. The BBC is having two events. Channel 4 and Sky News, I believe, are having events. Well, Sky News certainly is after the ITV event on the 19th. I will be watching that. I do want to see a head to head between Corbyn and Johnson directly, and this is why. If you have all the party leaders on stage, okay, you can make the argument that they all deserve a say because all the parties have had some sort of groundwork. So the Greens had a bit of a resurgence in 2015, and they might argue with renewed attention on the climate this year, they should have a voice. The Brexit Party has certainly, made the presence felt. The SNP are the biggest party in Scotland, so, or at least they have the Scottish government. Um, So I'm not against each of the party leaders having a voice, but Nicola Sturgeon is not going to be Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and no one in England, Wales, or Northern Ireland can vote for her or her party. So for her to demand that she has a voice in a prime ministerial debate is a bit absurd. I think there should be several debates. I think there should be a head-to-head between Corbyn and Johnson because only one of those men is likely to be Prime Minister. I know Jo Swinson is putting on a brave front and saying she can absolutely be PM. I think she knows that the mathematics just won't, even if the Lib Dems do very well, let's be optimistic and say they get 20 more seats. The math will simply not work out for her to be Prime Minister, and she must know that. So I think it's just a bit of politics, basically. I think she's just, playing the victim to try and make a lot of noise and get ITV to give in. But she's not going to be Prime Minister. She could be a kingmaker, but she's not going to be Prime Minister, and she must know that. Nicola Sturgeon is not going to be Prime Minister by essence of the fact that even in parliamentary terms, her party being the third biggest party, they're a Scotland only party. It's not a United Kingdom party. And the Greens absolutely don't have a chance of forming government there. So I think have a prime ministerial debate, a head to head between Johnson and Corbyn. Okay, Green supporters, Brexit Party supporters, Liberal Democrat supporters, SNP supporters, they're not going to vote for Labour or Conservative, but it's going to be one of those men that are going to be heading the next government, right? So people would still have a right to see, what's at play there, so that if they do change party allegiance in the next election, they can know what direction they want to go. But the fact of the matter is, it is going to be one of those men as the next prime minister. Now, I do support having another election debate where all the party leaders are invited. But then you get into the issue of where do you draw the line? I mean, for me, it would be Labour, Conservative. I wouldn't just have the opposition parties. I think someone from the Tories should have to represent the government. Amber Rudd famously done it in the 2017 election. I thought she handled it pretty well, actually, considering the pressure she was under. But um, have the major parties have Conservative, Labour, Liberal Democrat, the Brexit Party. I'm not sure what the situation with UKIP is at the moment, if they can show themselves to be as significant as the Brexit Party. Um, I mean, I think they should, it's kind of leave vote divided. But anyway, okay, UKIP, the Greens, what is that now? Five parties. The SNP, six. But then you'd have to, would you include the DUP? That's the Northern Ireland only party. So Plaid Cymru, Wales only. So, where do you draw the line? That's where it starts to get complicated. I think to take part in a nationally televised debate, I think a party needs to show that they have significant appeal across the country. Um, I mean, for Nicola Sturgeon to argue she should be in the prime ministerial debate, it's pretty absurd because no one in England, Wales, or Northern Ireland can vote for her party. So, she's a Scotland only politician. Um, and despite what she and her party says, she does not represent Scotland. She just happens to be leader of the biggest party in Scotland at the moment. Um, So have a direct head to head between Corbyn and Johnson. Have another debate where you have, I'd say, probably six, seven leaders. But we've seen from the American debates how messy it can be when you have like 20 Democrats on stage. They had to divide it into two parts, in fact. It just turns into a shouting match, and I don't think that particularly helps the public. I don't think it's a great, actually, the other leaders are going to say, "Oh, it's more democratic." Maybe it is, but having a shouting match isn't good for democracy either. And then you get. I also think the way this. I'm not sure who is going to preside over the debate. I think it's Emily Maitlis for the ITV one. I'm not sure about that. Well, she's BBC, isn't she? Can't remember. But whoever does it, I hope they don't do a Jeremy Paxman or a Faisal Islam. I got really put off in 2015 when Islam. I think he was trying to be a Paxman. He just kept interrupting Miliband and Cameron. Very off-putting. It's one thing holding politicians to account, quite another just being plain rude. I've just seen an interview with Naga Manchetti and Boris Johnson, and she kept pushing this thing about um, can he connect with people? Does he have that people touch? I forget the word that was used. But she just came across not as a journalist, holding the Prime Minister to account, but just as being plain rude. And the Prime Minister said that's the most psychological question he's ever been asked. And she kind of semi sarcastically said, "Oh, good, I'm pleased we're holding you to account." You see, she maybe thinks that the public are thinking, "Oh, good journalists," but most people are thinking that's just. I honestly think even people who don't particularly like Boris Johnson will think that's just typical BBC arrogance. There are a lot of journalists out there at that sort of level, I think, who let their egos run wild. And it's one thing just, and I think she's starting to become another example of that. I think that certainly Paxman is a prominent example, but there are others. These journalists need to understand that they're in a position of power as well. Yes, they need to hold politicians to account. Yes, they need to ask the tough questions. Kay Burley is another example. But, I think the wider public are getting a little bit tired of these journalists being driven by their own egos. This gotcha style questioning. It's not tough journalism. It's just sensationalist journalism. And I really don't like it. But anyway, what I don't want to see is debates that just turn into farce where they're just shouting matches. And I think in 2015 it seemed a bit messy. I think 2010 um, was a lot cleaner because you had the three major party leaders and it was formatted in such a way that there wasn't sort of heckling from the audience. There may have been a bit of it, but I quite like the format of those 2010 debates. 2015 it felt a bit messy. 2017 even more so. So I think yes, let's have all the party leaders having a voice, but also if they're going to let the public ask questions, I think it should be a bit more diverse. I think just having three people ask questions, three or four people, they're in a privileged position, by the way. Those people that get to ask questions, let's do it properly. Let's make questions concise, to the point, topical. But journalists and moderators need to let the leaders answer. Certainly keep on point, but don't constantly interrupt them. It's like a boxing match where you have a referee who constantly breaks the fighters. People don't like to see that. So, likewise, you want a moderator who's tough, who's fair, but who isn't constantly interrupting. So, it's about getting a balance. I will be watching the 19th of November debate on ITV, the direct head to head between Corbyn and Johnson. Quite honestly, I haven't entirely settled on who I'm voting for this year. I mean, I know I'm wary of both those leaders, but that's partly why I want to watch it. I want to see them on the spot. I want to see them in a head to head. I think Johnson is more liable to get into personal ad hominem attacks, and that would be a mistake. Because he's plenty of ground to attack Corbyn without doing that. Be interested to see what happens, but let me know your thoughts specifically about the debates. If you are a Green supporter, an SNP supporter, Liberal Democrat supporter, I get your contention. Your leaders do have a right to voice their party's pitch, but be realistic. Caroline Lucas is not going to be the next prime minister. Neither is Nicola Sturgeon and Joe Swinson. Joe Swinson, I think, could be the kingmaker in a sense. The Liberal Democrats have always shown that they're the bounce back party, but realistically, she's not going to be prime minister.